rising to meet the needs of the communities it serves. Northside Hospital is dawning a new day in healthcare.
And thank you for joining us for the Dawson County Chamber's annual Eggs in the Economy event. We are thrilled to be joined this morning by Frank Norton Jr. of the Norton Agency for a presentation about our economy and trends in the real estate sector. Before we get to that, I'd like to extend our appreciation to our presenting sponsor, Northside Hospital for Sight, who, as we just saw in their video, has done and continues to do so much to support our health and wellness as a community. I'd also like to recognize and thank Rotary President Sharon Hall and members of the Rotary Club of Dawson County for partnering with us on this event and for all you do for our community. To everyone who has joined us by Facebook Live and YouTube, please consider letting us know you're here by dropping a note in the comment section. I know that Frank Norton Jr. is no stranger to many of you. Frank has been a tremendous champion of North Georgia and partner to chambers throughout the region for many years. Frank first joined the Norton Agency in 1986 and now serves as president and CEO. If you've spent any time around Frank, you know he is a fiercely devoted community servant with a penchant for out-of-the-box thinking and an unsurpassed acumen for developing pertinent data that informs both public and private sector decisions throughout our region. Thank you, Frank, for joining us this morning. We've all been eagerly looking forward to your presentation.
Thank you so much. First, thank you, Christy, for those very kind words. And thank you, Northside, because it's the service of organizations like you that are getting into the deep fabric of our thrival through this unusual time. This is a difficult time. I have been, as a data nerd, as many of you know, I have been searching the internet. I have been reading every report that I can to try to understand the socio changes of our community on an international, national, and especially on a North Georgia level. We are in interesting times, but as humans living in the civilization that we have created, we have maneuverability. We have the ability to think clearly, read, study, and then develop our own plan of action. I'm going to share a number of slides that we have been collecting. Many of this is through the mid-year data or has mid-year data in it. And I hope through that you can gain a perspective of where we are as a North Georgia economy and perhaps where we're going. And I'll leave you with some final thoughts in just a minute. I will share my screen here. And technology is wonderful. So we have a number of reports that you can go to, and you can download those reports at nortonintelligence.com. Coming out of this, one of my favorite quotes is about Warren Buffett. Nothing can basically stop America. You can bet on America. So I think we could probably also say that about Dawson County. Nothing can basically stop Dawson County, and you can bet on Dawson County as we maneuver through this. Yeah, it is somewhat like a tornado that is cropped up. Not quite sure how we, a proper analogy. Each quarter, our firm does a market temperature, and we did a market temperature of our business partners to determine what it was like on the end of the first quarter and then at the end of the second quarter. And oh, by the way, I will be sharing these charts with Christy, and she can send these charts to each and every one of you that request it through her. But we have a market temperature for small retail and a number of categories. And on this chart, you can see where it was in the end of the first quarter. And so retail had dropped precipitously to 3. It's back up middle of the year to 4.4 in terms of a 1 to 10 hot scale. You can see that some of the categories have not changed in attitude. Land for development, industrial, business expansion, farms, and we'll get into a little bit of those in a little higher level. On a residential side, homes under 175,000, if you can find them, are still strong. Lake homes under 500,000, that's even searching for the mysterious unicorn. We are seeing more distant real estate happening in our community. In terms of overall trends since the 2018, first quarter of 2018, when we started kind of tracking this, you can see that in January, the end of March, early February, end of March, early April, when we looked at this, we saw a precipitous crash of the market in market temperature or attitudes, and we're seeing it climb out. Some are climbing out faster than others. Retail and office are still problematic and will be for some time in terms of product categories. That's where we are today. So I'm a big guy on data. And one of the things that I was trying to understand is where we are today And in comparison with what many of you lived through, which was July of 2009, in 2007, we started seeing a slowdown, a crash in 2008, and most observers see July of 2009 as the depth of the recession, as the depth of the dismalness that we had been experiencing with number of foreclosures, et cetera. So I had, because we now have a 40-year database of information, we went back to July of 2009 to look at a couple of benchmarks. Home supply in July of 2009 was 12.8 months in the Atlanta, North Georgia region. We had 34,000 houses available for sale. 23,000 of those were under 250. We had a 9.5% unemployment rate. We had 11,525 new homes for sale or under construction. That was down from a peak of 2007 when we had 65,000 houses under construction. So you can see how the market stopped. We had 168,000 vacant developed lots, many of them in Dawson County, and the average home detached price was $240,000. Home supply is now, July of 2020, is a 3.78 months supply of houses. That hasn't changed because of the pandemic. The pandemic hasn't seen a huge flow of foreclosures, maybe yet. Hasn't seen a slowdown in housing, especially in North Georgia. Our listing inventory is half of what it is. Our house inventory in the region that we study is 4,000 houses under $250,000 in value, not 23,000. Our unemployment rate is an era that's really supposed to be it's really supposed to be 9.3. Our 9.3 unemployment in North Georgia is the same, roughly the same as the 9.5 unemployment rate that we saw in July of 2009. Apologize for that error. The number of homes under construction is 9,400. Our vacant lot number is been reduced by 100,000, but watch the home average price now at $314,000, a huge surge in that 11-year period of time. This is indicative of where we are today, a snapshot in July of 2020, which gives me hope that the market still has strong foundations across most all product lines. If we looked at other benchmarks, multifamily vacancy in Atlanta, the region was 18% in July. The CPI rate was a negative point. Prime rate was 3.25. Mortgage rates was for 30 years was a 5.22. Our region's population was 1.9 million people. That is not including Atlanta. That is just the North Georgia region. Our annual population rate is 1.28. Per capita income was 32,000. Consumer confidence rate was 47. And the regional tax base was $35 billion. We had 475,000 square feet of construction going on in July of 2009. If we look at July 20, our multifamily vacancy is 3.5%. People have filled those apartments. There's very limited new construction, and there is an anti-apartment mentality. There was a major project that was defeated in the Brazelton area last week. They went into the county commission thinking that 300, 400 unit apartment complex was a shoe-in. Someone organized, even though it is distant and they only allowed 50 people in the room, Someone organized buses from the Brazelton area who bussed people in and brought lawn chairs, filled the lawns around the county commission administration building, which intimidated everyone, and it was defeated 5-0. 5-0. And so they don't necessarily have to be in the room. They just have to be on the property. They made a very big statement of coming out against that project. Our annual CPI rate, not much change. Prime rate, not much change. But our mortgage rate for 30 years is now dropped to 3.15, July of 2020, roughly the same today. That 3.15 is the lowest rate that we're tracking in the last 40 years. Tremendous opportunity if you are refinancing or purchasing a new house. Our region's population has grown to 2.3 million people. We are slowing our annual growth rate. Our per capita income is 46 versus 32, so we are more affluent as a general community. Our consumer confidence rate is still strong. We are still buying goods and services, just a different channel. We may be buying them through buying our groceries or meals through HelloFresh or as some sort of delivery service from Kroger or Publix, or we are buying from Amazon. I thought the other day that I no longer needed to buy Amazon stock because it's so high. I think I need to buy cardboard stock because of the number of boxes that are being used and recycled. Our region's tax base, including Dawson County, has increased. It actually fell in 2011 and 12 as the tax constricted and values dropped. We've back up and exceeded it. So we are now a regional tax base of 51 billion versus 35 billion. And it's amazing. We have construction going on in July of 2020. 4.8 million, almost 4.9 million square feet is under construction in Forsyth and Dawson. Along I-85, where the most of construction is going on in the Jackson and Franklin areas, where we actually have a 2 million square foot facility being built by SK, and a number of other small warehouses, including Amazon penetrating into Northeast Georgia. A much different picture than we had at the depth of the recession. That should give each one of us some optimism. I'll pass that chart. If we look at the house sales, the first 6 months of 2019 versus 2020, what we were interested in is to see where the sales were happening. There is a movement out into the suburbs, and the movement does show some slight change in Dawson. Let's go back a minute. So Dawson's change from 1 year to the next is 11%, whereas some counties are up 3 and 4%. But I wouldn't worry about it. We really don't have much inventory anywhere. If we look at the overall quick indicators, is that we have less than a month and a half supply, 2 months of supply in houses under 150,000, and even less in houses between 150 and 250,000. And if you follow this chart up to $750,000 and under, there's a 8.5, 9 month supply of houses at that price point level. And only when you get to the larger houses do you see a concern in supply over demand. We have a strong market. Houses under $600,000 is a still strong market. And had we not a change in the federal banking laws, we would see far more spec construction going on than we do today, which we really don't see. And the bankers still have their hands constricted by the feds. And you can see the change in inventory under 150,000 in Metro Atlanta. We're off 57%. We're off 42% in houses under 250. We're off of 32% in houses under 400,000. You see the change in volume. This is a sales by price point. The black line represents houses over $750,000, still a strong market. And one of my lake teams, Sheila Davis, who many of you know, indicated that there were 34 houses on Lake Lanier over $1 million traded hands the first 6 months of 2020, 34, as compared to the first 6 months of 2019, and there were 22, 10 more, 12 more. A significant change in houses over $1 million as people, we think, escaping the metro Atlanta area and other metro markets. And the inventory by price point, which is the lowest inventory we've seen in probably 5 years. So each year I come up with what I call the top 10 trends in Northeast Georgia, and I have researched and discussed with our staff to figure out what we think is the top 5 trends for the mid-year of 2020. They include living with COVID, how we living with COVID and how we are adapting, returning home, an increase in what I refer to as distant real estate, our inventory pushing new lows, and then a search for sustainable investment. So COVID is really shaping how we live, work, play, worship, how we educate our children, how we educate ourselves. We read and are bombarded, but the reality is we're living through this and we are individually adapting. We also need to recognize, as we have in our own firm, is that we're going to have periodic work interruptions. We have flare-ups of someone being exposed, doesn't come into work. We've asked them to stay home. That work interruption where they have to start working back at home. They are waiting on a test, which we're seeing is anywhere from 3 days to as long as 14 days. We are seeing some flare-ups of this illness, and I think that we're going to continue to see that until there is a vaccine, and a vaccine that works, and the widespread distribution of that vaccine. So is that going to be mid-year 2021? And while we may have a vaccine that comes out in November, how the healthcare workers are going to be given that. And I think that the educators need to be the second priority, personally, and that we can adapt as a business. But until it is widely used and may end up being mandated, those of you who are my age, I'm 64, remember getting a polio cube that we all went to the gym at Gainesville and had to take a polio vaccine through a sugar cube as children. And it was mandated by the federal government. Polio, really horrific disease, but it was really mandated by the federal government. And until we get mandated by the federal government, we are going to end up having to live with these periodic work interruptions. And then I am tired of the media. And I don't have a solution to it, but you get 5 different opinions each hour on each individual topic. And I think we have to filter through that, and we are all suffering from media overload, especially as we're now going through this election period. Returning home, it's really interesting because I think what we've seen is that about the 11th of March, we were all sent home. And we suddenly had to rethink our home, and home is the safety and security. We turned on stoves and ovens that hadn't been turned on in years. We had to figure out how we were going to cook for our family, how we were going to work in multiple zones of our homes. But it became readily apparent that the safety and security of our home was so important. A roof over our head and the security and warmth of home. So we're seeing homes morph. We're finding that fiber is a required utility, that's speed. And if I can encourage the government leaders in Dawson and along Georgia 400 and in the state legislature, with all speed, invest in utility infrastructure of speed. Our North Georgia fiber optic network needs to be expanded, needs to be fully funded, and we need a pipeline of fiber along every state highway and then into the local neighborhoods. Because that fiber is the connection that we're finding to offices, home offices. At the same time that home office is being used, we have 3 children on 3 different lesson plans, on 3 different computers, going to school at times. And so fiber is becoming as important as water. The kitchen's gained life back. We're finding spices in the back of the cabinet we haven't ever used. We're experimenting, but then we also need the outdoor living rooms because we want to have a different space than just our normal living room. During the pandemic in April, I moved into a temporary place, and I needed a new TV. So I decided, socially distant with a mask, my wife and I walked into Target on a Sunday morning at 7:30, right before church, and to find a TV. And I had 3 choices. Not 3 different brands. I had 3 choices. There was only 5 TVs available that morning. And when I was in checkout, the guy behind me had another one of those TVs. And so we are sitting in our living rooms, and we are we're experiencing our TV, and that 28-inch doesn't work anymore, so I need an 84-inch, which isn't available. We also are seeing a demand for outdoor play sets, yards for distance playing. We've got to redesign houses for multiple study areas. The hottest thing in middle-class housing today is that there is a Zoom room, a room that is quiet, away from everyone else, that you could have a Zoom meeting or one of 4 that you might have during a day. And then we are also seeing the need for multi-generational spaces, and that is having our children there and perhaps bringing in our older adults all within the same roof. I also looked at a couple of different houses, and one of the features of this real estate agent showing us was this gigantic closet. And they said, this is an extra closet. It isn't a pantry. It isn't for the vacuum cleaner. It's just an extra closet. And this can be your supply closet for the next pandemic, the next what if. Your supplies of toilet paper, of other necessities that may not that may ultimately be in short supply. The hot neighborhoods are neighborhoods with parks or walkability, sidewalks, ease of getting around. The real estate industry has developed strict showing protocols, and we're seeing more and more virtual showings, really not houses sold over the internet without someone walking through, but that walkthrough of that house, maybe with the real estate agent standing in the driveway, helping guide the new resident or the potential resident through the house via cell phone. We also are seeing the rise of distant real estate, and distant real estate comes in a lot of different categories. One, in residential, we're seeing pandemic preppers. We're seeing folks who are buying cabins in the woods, who are escaping the high rise in Atlanta, Georgia, for a townhouse that is in Dawson or Forsyth, or a cabin in Lumpkin County. So yards, cabins, and farms become extremely important. Gentlemen or gentlewoman farms are probably the hottest call real estate folks are getting today. That's throughout Northeast Georgia. That is a farm that is a non-agricultural producing farm, but has a farm character, has house and buildings, but non-agriculture producing, of somewhere between 5 and 30 acres. We're also finding the need for recreational property. One of our clients wanted to invest in 150 acres that he could put that had some trails, or he could build some trails that he and his sons, or he as in children, sons and daughters, could take their four-wheelers out and be outside. We also are seeing on the commercial side an expansion of distant real estate. The poultry industry is a great example where they have been shrinking the assembly line, placing person by person by person right up against each other to shrink that assembly line. Now with COVID, it has to be expanded. They've placed plexiglass shields in between, and we're now seeing them rethink the assembly line so that that becomes further and further distant apart. What that means is they're going to have more floor plate, more footprint of industrial going forward where there is heavy labor intensive. You won't have that in an Amazon warehouse, but you certainly will have that in the basic assembly lines, which are not robotic. And that is going to change. The other interesting thing about industry is where they would have a central cafeteria. They can no longer have a central cafeteria. So they now have multiple areas for lunch breaks, for coffee breaks. We're seeing this in office space where the cafeteria or the lunch room or the break room has now been blown apart into an office, and you have multiple coffee stations so that you don't have you minimize the cross-pollination or the crossing of employees. The other parts of distant warehousing is a shrinking of distance. We have used supply lines from China and from Korea and Malaysia for many of our parts. Some of that that's been a wake-up call when China shut down and Korea shut down. We've developing an apartment complex and putting alarm systems in there, and there's a 4 months backlog of getting equipment out of Korea and China for alarm systems. And so what we're seeing is an industry that might have 4 different plants making that widget. They're going to leave one in China. They're going to move one to Peru. They're going to put one in Malaysia, and they're going to put one in the United States, or 2 in the United States. And so we're seeing a return of industry for that tightening of supply lines. And so the distance had been great, and now they're shrinking the distance. The other interesting thing that we're seeing is a major stockpiling of food because of that supply line potential breaking. We're seeing the freezers in all of North Georgia are full, waiting lists. And lastly, we seeing a flood of out-of-state buyers. In talking to D.R. Horton or Pulte, I can't remember which, in the last month with one of my brokers, passed this information on of the houses that they've sold since April. 27% of those buyers were from New York to Atlanta, Georgia, actually North Georgia. We're seeing huge migration from the big cities of the Northeast, and they're coming south. The wealthy are leaving the cities first, and then the second wave is from folks in big cities with families that are in small quarters having to distance educate their children or the safety of their children, and they're moving out to Connecticut or Vermont or St. Simons. And we're seeing a flood of out-of-state buyers into our region as we have gained some notoriety of being progressive for business and progressive with this contagion. Our inventory is pushing new lows. We have strong employment, and then we have weak employment. Our weak employment is tourism. Our weak employment is restaurants. Our weak employment is those categories which are the fun categories. Our strong employment is the healthcare worker, is the Kubota's trying to hire, is the Amazon's trying to hire. That's putting pressure on homes under $200,000 in value. They are escalating faster than the CPI, this flood of out-of-state buyers. And then we are having labor and COVID interruptions of the supply chain for construction. I am in the middle of reading a report on the evolution of the ecosystem of construction, because parts are difficult to find. You have to order a developer today has to place an order for the appliances for his unit the day he starts grading, or he may not get them. I mentioned earlier the alarm systems. Toilets are largely made in Japan or China. Parts and component shortages. We also are seeing some manufacturers of construction components using COVID to increase their bottom line, whereas some lumber mills had been running 7 days a week or 6 days a week in multiple shifts. They've reduced their own staff. They're going to 8 or 9 hours of productivity versus 12 or 14 hours of productivity in production, and then they're increasing the bottom line cost. Our firm is involved in building six rental houses in downtown Gainesville, and I was told at the end of July that the framing package was going to go up 31% in the month of August. So we bought on July 28th 6 full packages so that we could avoid that additional cost. Was the cost because of COVID, or the cost because of a manufacturer trying to reduce his own staff and increase his bottom line? I don't know. And then rental houses is the same old song. Inventory is a new low. There's a new project being built behind Kroger in Gainesville. It opened up, the first phase opened up, interestingly enough, March 1st. And as of today, they are 70% leased. 70% leased since March 1st. A huge demand, and those units are renting in the $1,600 to $1,800 a month. There is a huge shortage of rental housing, and it's the yin and yang of employment. The middle class jobs are still strong. That hourly wage, tourism based, is still struggling. You can see here, this is a mid-year inventory of houses, and you can see we have the lowest level of inventory of all houses since 2006. And then you can see the sales that we've had in the first 6 months of this year as compared to all of last year. And all indications are that we will match the number of sales we had the first in 2019 by the end of this year. In Dawson, not much difference in Dawson. You have a very low supply, it's probably a month and a half supply of houses under 150. You have a month supply of houses between 150 and 200. You have 2.8 months supply of houses under 350. Only when you get to the 750,000 and above do you have really a supply in what I would call a concerning zone. And that's really about, it's probably 13, maybe 12.8% months of supply. Dawson County shows its strength. It also shows the last 6 months sales. Look at the $150,000 to $250,000 houses, and you can see that we sold a ton of houses, in the 150 to 250, the 250 to 350 range, and we have absolutely no inventory for that demand. We'll go into those charts. Those can be those of you who are info junkies can look at that in a later date. And lastly is that people are on the search for sustainable investments. We are, because there've been less spending, many middle class and above have become cash hoarders. They're actually now, as we're seeing, paying off of some of their debt. There still is a concern of an impending a tax change, even with a stability of the House and Senate and President. We're going to have to deal with the trillions of dollars we've spent on the pandemic on top of the trillions of dollars we already own. And that very well most likely will lead to change in personal income tax and most definitely a change in inheritance tax. Since some of that is long-term debt, the long-term solution is to change the exclusions for inheritance, roll it back from the 11 million, I think it is today, to back to the 5 or 6 that it was 4 or 5 years ago. People are looking for sustainable investments. People are looking for pockets of sustainable investments. The ones that we think still have strong potential are rental housing, acreage and farmland, that gentlewoman farm, vacation rentals. There's not a VRBO available in Northeast Georgia for rent this fall, because not only do we can't go to Europe, we can't go to we are hesitant about getting on an airplane, but we still want a weekend off, and so we're looking for that vacation rental. During the summer, there hasn't been a single houseboat available for rent on Lake Lanier. We want places that have takeout food. The new business product for McDonald's is to have drive-through only. The Dunkin' Donuts now has a drive-through only business model, store model, and are planning 100 in the Southeast. So you're going to see the elimination of in-store eating. The sites aren't going to be any smaller. They're still going to be an acre, but you're going to see, much like I see at Chick-fil-A, concentric rings ending at the point of the drive-through, where we have cars in concentric rings going around and around and around, so that we're stacking more cars on the same site. We just don't have that restaurant in-house dining. Personal service retail stores that have storefronts where you can park in the front door, walk straight in, get what you want, and straight out. People are not going to browse hours and hours inside a store for wearing a mask. And then food, drug, and medical. Those we see as sustainable investments. So to wrap up, what do we see next? Fire, petulance, locusts? I don't think so. What I do see is that we're going to see our people, we're going to see North Georgians build up their reserves, build up their financial reserves, solidify their foundation, build their businesses, building up their reserves for the next what if. We're going to see building up supplies. The medical industry has learned that the supply chain can be interrupted. A client of ours who gets certain gets certain orders of masks, get delivered a box, and the box is 3/4 empty, because that's the only allotment that they have. And so we're seeing creative solutions on building up supplies, our personal supplies and business supplies. We need to be investing in technology, that's speed and fiber throughout Dawson County. That is into every reach of Dawson County. There's going to be more distant office use, and there's going to be that remote distance is becoming very important. The offices are still going to be there. The bullpens are going to disappear, and walls are going to go up. Norton just built 5 walls in various bullpens across our campus to provide individual distance We also put in Halo air filtering systems, but we have to invest in technology, and that is safety of our employees, and that's safety of our workers and safety for ourselves. And then we have to learn how to navigate this technology. We have to learn how to navigate our a new phenomena or a new process, really in a process, which is medical online appointments, virtual appointments, and food delivery. And we have to invest in sustainability. That's investing in rooftops. That's investing in distribution. That's investing in supply lines so that Dawson can be better prepared for the next what if. That is building our inventory. We need to be taking a deep breath. We need to prepare. You need to be preparing your own household, your own business. And you have to sift through the various media and figure out what works for you. Humans are adaptable species, and we can think on our feet and turn on a dime. And that's really what's happened. North Georgia, Dawson, our American civilization, while we can throw darts at various pieces, has turned on a dime. And we're going to be learning from this experience and be better off. I'm going to try to stop my slideshow and get back on. So I think we may have a little time for questions. I'll try to go through this. Any questions? So overall, we're doing great. We've learned to pivot. That's my new favorite phrase, pivot. And through this pivoting, we're taking the circumstance we're in and figuring out how to be problem solvers to advance us. And y'all are all to be congratulated. I want to personally thank all of the healthcare workers, the government leaders that have stepped up, our local government leaders who've helped us adapt, the first responders to those that are sick, and perhaps the food delivery and the folks at our grocery stores, because while we've had certain items missing on certain shelves, by and large, there's something we can eat. And I'm amazed at that supply chain for the groceries. And I am appreciative that they have stepped up and helped us work through these issues. It's not a political issue. It's not an economic issue. It is a social adaptation of Dawson County. Thank you very much this morning.